Hi everybody, thank you for being here. Happy Tuesday. Here we are as always. Appreciate all of you that come to show up in whatever capacity it is that you're able to. Whether it's live or a replay, stopping by for part of it, all of it, saying hi in the comments or not. Hi Mary, hi Nikita, hi Melissa. Yeah, happy new moon week. So Sunday was new moon in Leo. We talked about that a little bit last week, falling kind of right between our two live sessions here. So hopefully you had a great weekend and a great start to this new lunar cycle that we have. So that is kind of the first overarching part of this week, is that the lunar phase is the new moon moving towards the first quarter moon phase. So it's that growing phase. So the moon is increasing in light, things are growing from the seeding point. So trying to make a little more note of where we are in the lunar cycle, just so that way you can start to see how that's playing out within your own lives. So anything that was kind of started or initiated will start to kind of take form and start to grow a little bit. So remember that some lunar cycles are a little louder within our lives than others, has a lot to do with your own chart and your own path and things like that. But that's where we are in the lunar phase. I'm going to put the intention up before we get any further here. So this week, I reconsider connections where I desire prosperity. I reconsider connections where I desire prosperity. Intentions are always released on Sunday, so that way you can take a peek at it yourself before we meet here. So if you haven't done so already, this is the first time you've heard the intention, go ahead and think on it for just a moment, not spending too much time or too much thought. Mercury is retrograde in Virgo anyways, so there could be the tendency just to kind of spiral with those thoughts. So just first impressions, first thoughts, first feelings. What do these words bring to you? I consider connections where I desire prosperity. I release it on Sunday, so that way you can sit with it yourself, and I highly encourage you to do so. That way you can kind of work with it in your own brain and just kind of see what comes up. Even if you don't know where it falls in your chart, even if you've never seen your birth chart before, even if you don't know a single thing about astrology, just taking that phrase, since it's birthed out of energies that are surrounding all of us and play at some part in our lives around us here, it will start to kind of form some sort of reaction or some sort of feeling. It'll invoke something within you somehow, pulling into the intention. So looking at, let's pull up my notes here and we'll look at what we have this week. So new moon in the sign of Leo on Sunday. Mercury is now retrograde in the sign of Virgo. So in early Virgo we have Venus, which entered over the weekend, and we have Mercury. Mercury is now retrograde, full effect as of like yesterday. I always think the lines are a little bit blurred about exactly where it starts, because it's not just like a set time. Like this is, yeah, it's kind of a fading in and out. So Mercury is retrograde in the sign of Virgo, which is its own sign. So Mercury rules both Gemini and Virgo, okay? Retrograding back towards Venus. Tomorrow, Venus and Mercury will conjoin in Virgo. So this is our biggest aspect that we have this week. And at the same time that Venus is coming into a conjunction with Mercury, we have the Sun sextiling Jupiter. And actually, at that same time that Mercury and Venus conjoin, the moon will be in Virgo at the end, late Virgo, at the same time. So super potent in energy tomorrow, which would be Wednesday, August 7th. So something to play in for you to play into there. But excuse me just a moment. So Mercury retrograde. We know that when any planet goes retrograde, there is some sort of reworking or some sort of revisiting of whatever that planet is doing within our own lives, okay? So Mercury representing our thoughts, our perception, the way we communicate with others, the tools and the resources that come to us. Somehow, these things are being revisited, maybe things that haven't fully been played out, maybe things that were kind of pushed aside, things that weren't fully completed, things that we kind of thought were done, but they weren't quite tied up, so they're going to kind of start to come back our way. These are the themes of Mercury retrograde just within itself. When you have Mercury retrograding in the sign of Virgo, you start to really think about the resources that we have. Virgo is the earth sign that is ruled by Mercury, where Gemini is the air sign that is ruled by Mercury. So it's much more about thoughts, much more within the mental realm, much less tangible, okay? Virgo is a bit more physical, a little bit more tangible as an earth sign. So thinking about the resources that we have and how we've utilized them, maybe how we've underutilized them, maybe the resources that we have provided to others and what we've gotten in return from that. Maybe the resources that we have received from others and what we have given in return. It goes both ways. So these are the type of things that we're going to start to see as Mercury is retrograding back through early Virgo, which will bring us until next week when Mercury goes back into Leo. But you have this revisiting of all of these different resources and how they are worked together, how the different pieces of the puzzle fit together. And as Mercury comes into contact with Venus tomorrow, you have this cohesion where maybe if the first little bit, like the first couple days of retrograde seems like things are a bit chaotic and things are maybe like changing kind of quickly, there is perhaps a little bit of a calm, perhaps a little bit of a understanding or a little bit of cohesion or a little bit of peacefulness here, a little bit of way of working together. When Mercury, the planet of resources, which when it's in Virgo, its own sign, is very good at like pulling apart the details and looking at the individual pieces and whether things are working or not, what needs to be added, what needs to be subtracted, what needs to be modified from whatever the situation is at hand. And then, so there's this kind of like detail-oriented, or maybe in a maybe less positive way, a little bit of like a nitpickiness, or like a precision, or an ability to focus in on small little details. Mercury comes into contact with Venus, and there's this ability to take these small little details and find a little bit of way that you can bring a little bit of tact or a little bit of cleverness into the way that these things need to be reworked. There may be an ability to communicate desires and needs specifically based on like what Mercury retrograde is bringing up. So those things that have not been addressed, those things that have been avoided, those things that loose ends weren't quite tied up yet. It's really kind of a cool aspect to have at the beginning of this Mercury retrograde. And I feel like, although Virgo is not the place that Venus necessarily prefers to be, it's actually one of the places that Venus is said to be debilitated in, but Venus in Virgo is very good at like leveling all of these different resources and handing them out in a way that works for everybody, if that kind of makes sense. Where there could be a tendency to make sure you keep what you need, which is still is necessary sometimes, right? But with Venus in Virgo, she's a little bit more willing to give and to share, as long as she still has enough. So maybe other planets in Virgo may want to keep a little bit extra to themselves. When we have Venus there, she wants to share, and she wants to let everybody have a little bit of piece of the pie that is going around. So I really, really like this aspect that we have this week, and if we look at our intention, I reconsider connections where I desire prosperity. Desire, prosperity, those are both Venusian words. And reconsidering the connections. Mercury retrograde in Virgo. So I think this intention for this week is just very spot on with this aspect that we have, which is very much in the building phase right now. But next week going to be, or sorry, not next week, but building now, tomorrow, Thursday, Friday, like really through this whole week since it's exact on Wednesday. We have this ability to take what needs to be reworked and bring a little bit of finesse to it, a little bit of a clever way of looking at it, a little bit of tact, a little bit of a calm energy to knowing that there are things that are not quite perfect. And maybe that's what it could be too. It could be just knowing that these things need to be changed, these things need to be reworked or added or modified a little bit. But that's okay. We can do that. We can handle it. We can work together, and we can take these connections and we can reconsider them and reconfigure them into a way that is going to bring us the prosperity that we desire, whatever it is that you've been working on. So this Mercury retrograde in Virgo, looking at all these little pieces, looking at what works, looking at what doesn't work. Coming into contact with Venus, spending this first little bit of retrograde co-present with Venus in the sign of Virgo, what is working and what isn't working as far as bringing balance, bringing cohesion, bringing what's best for everybody. Venus likes everybody to be happy. Virgo has resources to provide. So Venus in Virgo has resources that it can provide for everybody to have a little bit of whatever it is that is going around, the positive resources that are going around. And then next week, I believe next Thursday, Mercury will make its way back into the sign of Leo. So then we have a little bit of a shift. So if we start out with thinking of Mercury retrograde of what's working, what isn't working, what's bringing balance and what is not bringing balance, where is the cohesion, where do we need the cohesion, where are there little teeny pieces of the story that aren't lining up quite right, or is there a little piece of the scenario that needs to be taken away and something else put in it, that type of thing. And then Mercury retrogrades back into Leo, and then the question of the revisiting changes a little bit from what resources are working and what resources are not working, what do we have available, to how can we take these resources that we have available that we are dispersing and that we are changing a little bit, how can we use that to make our solar light shine a little bit brighter, whatever that means to you. How can we take this reworking and use it to shine a little extra light within your own self where maybe it has been dimmed, maybe where the light has not been able to reach its full potential, maybe where the light has kind of been behind some sort of shadow. Where have you not been fully visible, where you desire to be visible? Where do you wish to be seen, where you have not quite been seen? Those are the questions that I see coming up within this Mercury retrograde. This first little part, like I said, Venus is sitting right there with Mercury, so it's I feel like it's a little bit more cohesive. As Mercury moves back into Leo, it's going to move into square with Uranus from Taurus to Leo. So that's a little bit more rocky. But positive side here, right? We're looking within the meditation here and within the way we are looking to lean into the energies each week here, specifically in this session, in this meditation. We're looking to work with and lean into the energies that are around us. So if we think of the first part as that co-presence with Venus, where can we look for that balance? Where can we see where the balance is and where the balance is not? And then how can we use that to go forward into the second part of Mercury retrograde? It's not quite half. The Leo portion's a bit longer than the Mercury portion. But how can we take that first part, this cohesion that we're finding and this drive for balance, and how can we use that to motivate this square between Mercury and Uranus, where we're going to want to break through somehow, we're going to want to bust down the barriers, we're going to want to do something a little different. Things are going to be, there might be some sort of surprise element to it, but how can we use this beginning part with Venus in Virgo and Mercury and Virgo working together? How can we start to put together a plan to where we have the courage, and we have the like emotional backing is the word that's coming to me, to move through that square and shine our light forward in a way that works for everybody and is spontaneous, but not out of bounds, like that type of thing, right? Not so far out in left field that it makes it really hard to get back kind of to the center and to the core, if that makes a little bit of sense. And then, Sun sextiling Jupiter. At the same time, we have this aspect tomorrow on Wednesday. That same aspect of Mercury and Venus coming together. We have Sun sextiling Jupiter. That just brings this extra level of positive light and this radiant light as the Sun and Jupiter are working together to shine a positive light on something. Mercury and Venus are coming together. So, sometimes I think we forget that Mercury is the messenger. Mercury is the psychopomp and the guider of souls. Mercury brings us messages to and from the underworld to Earth. Mercury guides souls as they pass on from this earthly plane into whatever other plane you think is out there, wherever you think we go. So Mercury brings us messages and brings us tools and resources to work together. Think about the information from like Hermes and Thoth. Think about like the great truths of the different messengers throughout all of the ages and throughout all of the different stories. Here, as Mercury is going through retrograde, Mercury is making its way through this process of going through a death and rebirth process as it goes into the underworld, into where it's not visible when we get underneath the beams of the sun, when Mercury gets so close to the sun that it's like completely under the effect of the sun. So Mercury is going through this process of this resetting process, okay, to get from the evening star phase to the morning star phase, and this is a process that we're just kind of starting here. And as Mercury goes through this process, Mercury brings us messages from the underworld, from the subconscious, from that area of invisibility, okay? And then within that process of invisibility, there's a rebirth, a transformation, and a rebirth that happens on the other side. So thinking of like a caterpillar going into a chrysalis and emerging as a butterfly. There's a process that has to happen. And just as there's a process that has to happen for Mercury, there's a process that has to happen here for us. And I think sometimes it's easy to forget that there's a process. Looking at the planetary cycles reminds me that there's a process and things are not like instant gratification. That instant gratification and that like I want it now may start to kind of increase here as Mercury and Jupiter get closer to their conjunction, which we will talk about next week. But they are within 3 degrees of each other now. So there is this like expansion of drive, motivation, willpower, this like very powerful motivation, or on a less positive side, kind of like a self-aggrandizing, like granting all importance to whatever Mercury and Jupiter in the sign of Gemini are doing. So there's this building focus where Gemini is within your own chart. And that puts a little bit of pressure onto what Mercury is trying to rework, and a little bit of stress. So I think remembering that there's this process, and that within time, Mercury brings us the messages that we need to hear. And Mercury going through Virgo and then back into Leo brings us these very clear and precise messages, and then these very like energizing and revitalizing messages, okay? So pulling the pieces apart and looking at all the different things, even when Venus is there in Virgo, can be a little bit overwhelming, okay? But it's all part of a process, and just remembering that it's a part of a process that needs to happen. So this week, I reconsider connections where I desire prosperity. I reconsider connections where I desire prosperity. And there's still a lot of Venus action going on here. So that desire and that prosperity is coming, but there might be a little bit of work that has to happen here to get there. So I reconsider connections. As you reconsider those connections, remember the end goal. Remember the prosperity that we are working towards, rather than just focusing on that beginning part. So I really see where like this intention could be hyper focused on the first three words. I reconsider connections, like reconsidering, reworking. Almost gets you like a little anxiety worked up, even a little bit. But lots of good energy this week for making a plan that can be conducive to working for everybody. Starting to rework things and starting to bring things forward. Excuse me. Throughout this, even after Mercury retrogrades back into Leo, Venus and Mercury are going to continue working together throughout this entire Mercury retrograde period, which goes through the end of August, I believe August 29th, 28th, something like that. Because Venus is going to be in Virgo for the duration of this Mercury retrograde, which means that Venus is answering to and working with Mercury, the ruler of Virgo, throughout the stay. It's pretty interesting that as soon as Mercury goes direct in the sign of Leo, at 21 degrees of Leo, just after that is when Venus moves from Virgo into her own sign of Libra. So it's kind of like, even though Venus is not, or Virgo is not the easiest place for Venus to be, because Venus likes things to be flowy and sherry and, just letting everybody to have whatever they want to have, rather where Virgo is a little bit more like, no, you get this piece, you get this piece, you get this piece, you get this piece, there. Now we all have a piece. Where Venus would much rather just go find a whole nother plate to share with everybody, so that way everybody can have all their share and all that they want. Venus is going to be working with Mercury through this whole process. So she's there with her resources, she's holding space for Mercury, and just bringing a little softness, I feel like, to this retrograde. This Mercury retrograde is a very productive one. It can be a little stressy, it can be a little anxiety inducing. Anything when we're talking Virgo can be. Anything when we're talking Mercury retrograde can be too. But there is lots of ability for productivity. But I think focusing on this very beginning part in order to get to the productivity is very important, because it's going to ground us, staying within that Venusian energy, within that feminine energy of holding yourself together and holding space for not only others and holding space but also for yourself. So holding space for the resources that you have and space for the resources that others have. So like I said, I think focusing on laying out your plans or whatever it is that you want to work on for Mercury retrograde earlier rather than later is a good thing. Just my suggestion. So yeah, that's the astrology for this week. Hi Susan, I see that you're here. Yes, happy new moon week, new moon in the sign of Leo, 10th house, I love it. My 10th house. So that's the astrology for this week. Mercury is retrograding and coming into contact with Venus, and this conjunction with Venus here, this is a moment for us to flavor the rest of the Mercury retrograde, as these two planets are going to be working together. Remember that as Mercury makes its way into Leo, things get a little bit more hairy, just because of that square to Uranus. There's a little bit of tension that's starting to form too as Mars is starting to make it square to Saturn in Pisces. So a little bit more tension as this goes a little bit further. The blue moon on the 19th, so the full moon. Yeah, the full moon. I'm not super great on remembering exactly what like each of the different moons are for each month. And there's a name that correlates with each one of them, but I'm not super. I don't know why I'm not super up on that. So yeah, that'll be our full moon that we're talking about coming up here. So a couple cards that we have for this week. One tarot card, 2 oracle cards. So the tarot card is the High Priestess, and I feel like the High Priestess is very Venus and Virgo. So the High Priestess is this high feminine energy, but it's more of a in-between high feminine energy. So the Queen is a little bit more tangible, a little bit more like maybe physically supportive, where the High Priestess is a bit more spiritually supportive. So the High Priestess has a lot to do with that veil between like the seen and the unseen, okay? The world that we live in and the other side is what I like to call it, or the underworld or the overworld, whatever word you like to use. The High Priestess shows me a process of bouncing back and forth between the world that we live in, the world that we can see, and the spirit world that we can't quite see but we know is there, and they're coexisting together. It makes me think about Mercury retrograding back towards the sun, starting in the sign of Virgo. There is a sacred knowledge and a divine feminine intuition within the High Priestess. So the High Priestess coming through as the first card here is telling me to listen to those messages that are coming through and listen to that intuition, because there is some high intuitive energy here that is coming through this Mercury retrograde. Yes, there can be the zingy things, there can be the communication issues, there can be the technology issues. That's always a possibility. I would say if there are issues, they're probably like teeny tiny little technical things like that might almost make it a little harder to pinpoint, just because of that like detail oriented. Like you really might have to kind of look for like the problems that show up. You might really have to kind of look for whatever is causing that problem to get it to fully go away. So the High Priestess, Venus in the sign of Virgo, and that process that Mercury is going through, I think that is very, very fitting here. And then 2 oracle cards. The first one is that came through this cute little bee. Look at him. It says summer, bask in joy and light. Summer, bask in joy and light. Look at that pretty little bee. So when I pulled, these are the first 2 that I pulled. The third one was a follow-up. Looking at the High Priestess and then looking at the summer card, basking in the joy and the light, I instantly was thinking Virgo and Leo. And that's the order that they came up to. I pulled the tarot card and then the oracle card. And summer, basking in the joy and light. That is what Leo is about. And Mercury retrograding in the sign of Leo is about finding that light within you and seeing how you can use your light within you to shine forward, let other people shine through that light, have your light shine forward as other people's lights shine. Leo is very much about lifting other people up as long as Leo is lifted up at the same time. Leo is not going to fill from an empty cup. Okay? Nobody can fill from an empty cup, but Leo is not going to try to pour from an empty cup. Leo is going to fill its own cup first, which can be a very admirable, right? It can also be called self-focused or self-centered, which is one of the things that people say about Leo. So I was looking at these 2 cards, and it's okay. Listen to the messages. Listen to the intuition that is coming through. Know that you are between the seen and the unseen, and those messages are coming through Mercury retrograding. and know that there is a light and a joy to be basked in at the end. So, staying with the energy as it's coming through and working with it and knowing that there is going to be a light that is shining through. So for my follow-up, it was, where is that light going to shine through? How are we going to know where the light needs to shine through? How are we going to know when the light is shining? Just give me more information about this summer light shining through and the joy and the light that we're basking in. And then what comes up here is the wise one, another feminine energy. The wise one, this beautiful, wise female woman here with the owl and a raven with her. So the wise one, grow within your current situation. So this light, this summer, this basking in the sun and this solar light that comes from the sign of Leo is going to come through a process of growing through our current situation. So it's that process that Mercury is going through. Mercury going retrograding, moving back towards the sun, coming into this point of being fully within the sun, which we will talk about as Mercury goes cazimi in the future. But it's a process that is starting, and it's a process of resetting. It's a process of death and rebirth and restarting something new, or bringing something back. So this also tells me, grow within your current situation. This also tells me that, there's a process. We don't just jump from the start line to the finish line. You have to run the race that is in the middle. And sometimes I think we want to kind of skip running the race. So that's what I have for this week. And I like it. I reconsider connections where I desire prosperity. I reconsider connections where I desire prosperity. Taking that high priestess energy, the messages, the gut feelings. That's another thing about Virgo. Gut feelings are a real thing. And taking that energy, and how can you use that to make a plan? How can you use that high priestess energy of Venus in the sign of Virgo, Mercury working together? How can you communicate positively with somebody? How can you commune and spend time with somebody? How can you work well together to bring your resources together, or to problem solve, or to move forward towards some sort of greater light that you can shine forward? I think, Susan, I think the three cards worked out very well myself, and they always do. And sometimes I'm surprised for a second, but then I'm not surprised at the same time. It always works. And that's how we know that we're supported, right? So, we move into our meditation here. Very lovely, high feminine energy here of knowing what has to be done, the hard work, the steps that need to be taken, maybe exploring the parts that are working, exploring the parts that aren't working, and discovering what the steps that need to be taken. But either way, Virgo is a sign that knows what has to be done, and it will do what has to be done in order to survive for the long haul, which sometimes may mean withholding, sometimes it may mean dispersing, sometimes it can be a little bit of both. Think about Virgo season within the solar year. We're talking Northern Hemisphere perspective, but think about what happens in Virgo season in the Northern Hemisphere. Or think about what happens in that late summer to very, very early fall, okay? We are harvesting crops, we are dividing them up, we are canning and freezing and separating things so that way we have enough supplies to last us through the winter that is coming, the cold months, where things won't be quite as prosperous. And that takes a lot of planning, that takes a lot of organization, that takes a lot of willpower and determination. You can't grow a crop of carrots and eat all of the carrots in one setting and then not have any more for the winter time. That does not work. So that's the idea of Virgo, and that problem solving that comes within it. So wherever you've been struggling, wherever it feels like maybe you've been banging your head against a brick wall maybe a little bit, and this can relate to the Venusian things that have been going on. We've talked about Venus so much, especially with everything that Uranus has been through in the sign of Taurus. You can use this as a moment to twist that narrative and change things. Change your mind, change your thoughts. That's one of my favorite phrases for Mercury retrograde is you can change your mind. You can change the way you communicate. You can change the way you think. And sometimes within Mercury retrograde is the best time to go ahead and do that. So, all right, let's move forward before I just keep talking. Otherwise, I will just keep talking. One last look at the intention. I reconsider connections where I desire prosperity. I reconsider connections where I desire prosperity. Mercury connects us all to each other through communication. Mercury connects us to the other side and to other worlds. Mercury connects us to those tools and those resources that help us and benefit us and help us move forward. Mercury does not always get enough love and attention. Sometimes it gets a little more flack than it does good attention. So let's take this Mercury retrograde and let's use it productivity, okay? All right, I'm gonna take the intention off here, and we have our intentional candle. As always, it's white. I like to use white for these meditations because you can take the white candle and you can turn it into any color you want it to be. So if there's a color that comes into mind, picture the candle to be that color. White on its own, purifying, amplifying, clarifying. Taking our intention and then spreading it out wide, okay? Clarifying it, purifying it. So I'm going to light our intentional candle, and as I do so, I'm going to repeat our intentional phrase. Feel free to do so with me, either out loud or in your head. Feel free to write it down or whatever works well for you. So I'm going to light the intentional candle here, and as the flame ignites, it starts to grow, so does our intention. I reconsider connections where I desire prosperity. I reconsider connections where I desire prosperity. Thinking on that for just a moment, thinking on the intention, just seeing what comes to mind. Perhaps you've already had ideas, thoughts, experiences already coming to mind. Perhaps not much comes to mind. Either is okay. And then we take a moment to just check in with our breath. Not changing anything quite yet. Just observing and noticing the quality of your breath that you came here with tonight. As always, we make space for the events of the day, of the week, of the month, and of this life that has brought us to this moment. Just as there's a change and a fluctuation surrounding all of us through Mercury's retrograde energy, your breath can be in a state of fluctuation based on your environment, based on how you're feeling in your current interactions. So here we make space. Not judging, just acknowledging. After you've taken a moment to acknowledge your breath, we now slowly start to deepen the breath. As you take your next inhale in, notice how it feels as the air enters your body, as it moves down your throat, into your lungs, slowly expanding as you draw in the deepest breath you've breathed in all day. As you feel your lungs expand, your diaphragm moves down to make way for your inflated lungs. Perhaps your abdomen begins to distend as your navel moves away from your spine, filling you fully and completely before releasing the breath, slowly and gently. As you release that breath, attempt to have it be the longest, slowest, most productive exhale you've had yet today. As you take your next deep breath in, slowly and steadily, inhale extends slightly longer than the one before it. The exhale that follows, slightly longer than the one before that. Continuing this process of breathing in and out, connecting deeply with your breath. We know that our breath connects us not only to our physical body, but also to the energy and the ethers that surround us all. Through the inhale and through the exhale, each time you breathe in, you are taking in energy and oxygen from the atmosphere around you. And each time you exhale, you are releasing a part of your own essence into the environment around you. That energy continues to travel far and wide. I reconsider connections where I desire prosperity. How can you take this breath, this breath that is currently perfect for this exact moment? How can you take that breath and reconsider how perhaps you could improve it slightly for the next breath? Perhaps that's just slowing down the inhale and the exhale slightly. Perhaps it's having a little more mindful attention on the physical changes within your body as you inhale and exhale. Perhaps it's simply that the energy that comes to and from you through the inhale and the exhale will continue to increase your own energy. as you continue breathing in and out, slowly and gently, connecting deeply to your breath. I want you within your own mind's eye to see your life in front of you. Whatever that means, the first thing that pops into your head, that's what we're going to stick with. Whatever comes up, see this, feel this within your being, making space for whatever comes along with it. See the scene playing out within your head. Feel the feelings that comes along with it. Where is reconsideration a possibility? Where within this scene and within this life do you see an opportunity for Venus and Mercury to work together? Where can there be a beneficial connection, cohesive communication, loving thoughts and words, caring, I want you to continue to visualize this scene. Continue to visualize whatever shows up within your own life. See that scene in front of you and see it start to break apart into many, many pieces. Take note of what those pieces look like. Is there a specific shape or size? The whole scene in front of you begins to disassemble into little pieces, separating, moving apart from each other. Now where this scene was within your mind's eye, I want you to picture a beautiful glowing light. The pieces are all surrounding this light, hovering within space, separate, but yet still together. And this beautiful illuminating light that you see, this exhilarating light, is revitalizing and energizing. It's motivating and captivating. Fills you with such joy that you can't help but to bask in the light and to feel that high priestess energy of knowing that things are exactly as they should be at this moment. Now where you see that glowing light, you notice that the pieces that have been hovering around start to come back together. You notice that not quite all of the pieces start to come back. A few have left, a few have come in, perhaps a few pieces have been modified or changed in some way. These pieces start to come back together. And as they start to come back together, the form looks familiar but slightly different. You see these pieces coming together in a more cohesive and balanced manner. You notice that the pieces that did not return no longer benefit you fully. And the new pieces that have dropped in are intriguing. Some of the pieces have been modified, changed slightly, but still holding their original form. And you see all of these little pieces coming together to create this picture in your mind's eye that is more beautiful, more encouraging, more cohesive than you could ever imagine. As this scene comes together in front of you, the light still emanating from behind it, almost as it's holding and supporting that light, backing it up in a beautifully supportive way. And as you see your life in front of you, you take note of this process that you just watched. This process of disassembling, separating all of the pieces, bringing them back together in a slightly different form. And you realize the process that is in front of you. You know that there will be changes. You know that things may come with a couple bumps or hiccups, but you are motivated and you are driven by this solar light that you see emanating from behind this scene you see in your mind's eye. And as we close this meditation, I encourage you to, along with me, open up your hands and your heart to the energies that Mercury holds for all of us. Opening your heart and your mind to the messages that Mercury brings your way. The guider of souls, messenger of truths, whether you refer to this universal messenger energy as Mercury, whether you refer to it as Hermes or Thoth, whether you refer to it as Jesus or Buddha or any of the other messiahs that have brought great truths and messages, great understanding, knowledge, and information to this human world. Give thanks for the energy and the messages we have received and those that we have yet to receive. It's that guidance that brings us through these cycles in such a supportive way. thank you, all of you, for joining me in the meditation tonight. I think that this week, new moon in the sign of Leo, Mercury goes retrograde, there is such possibility in the change, in the initiation. It can be overwhelming, it can seem terrifying, it can seem invigorating. I love that we have a new moon just as Mercury is going retrograde in the sign that Mercury is going to retrograde into. There is this new initiation that started with the lunar cycle. Just following that, Mercury is going to start making its way back towards this sign to bring forward new messages, revisit things that have not quite been fully finished out yet. I would not be surprised if there's lots of new things, or things if we're revisiting things in a new way. But all really, really, really good. So thank you, all of you. Great things coming, yes, and lots to think about. Yeah, there's a lot going on in the month of August. There's a lot going on in July, but there's a lot going on in August too. And I think leaning into these energies in the early part of the month will help us a little bit later on in the month as things really start to kind of amp up and change. So take with you, firstly, our intention, right? Take our intention with you in the messages that you have received. Take this energy of the High Priestess, this intuitive, in-between worlds energy that connects us to what is and what has been. Connects us to what is here within the physical, what we can see, the tangible, and what's on the other side, the support that we have from the other side, whatever that means to you, whether that means ancestors, whether that means God, whether that means angels and spirit guides, your loved ones that have passed on, whatever it means to you. Take that and thank you. I see you guys saying thank you in the comments. No, thank you, because I get so much from these meditations and from preparing for this. I love it. I love it so much, and it would not be possible if it wasn't for all of you. So thank you, and I hope you all have a lovely week. Reach out at any time, and a new intention will be out Sunday for next week. So take a peek at that. If you need a reminder about next week's event, go to the Facebook page, go to the events tab, and find the event for next week, and respond, going, interested, whatever it is that you feel inclined to respond. And in doing that, you help it get around through that Facebook algorithm monster. So likes and shares and reactions, all of that goes a really, really long way. So thank you, all of you that do that. So reach out at any time, and I will talk to you all later. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, night, and a wonderful, wonderful week. So bye and take care. See you next week.